As many of you know, I love playing the Caro Kann with the black pieces. I find it to be an incredibly solid opening and very difficult to beat. And my CM opponent, stands for Candidate Master, also plays the Caro Kann against me in round 4. And I'm going to show you how I like to counter the Caro Kann, and we get a very nice position in the middle game. Now, if you haven't seen the previous 3 videos of this tournament featuring the first 3 rounds, then the playlist will be linked below to go and watch those. So now that everybody has gone that hasn't watched those yet, so far I'm playing for the University of Birmingham. We have 2 draws and 1 win. Remember that we are considered to be the bottom seed in this tournament, so we're doing very, very well so far against some good opposition. And these ratings, by the way, are not accurate. Obviously, a CM is not rated 1940, and I'm not rated 1740. He's more like 2300, and I'm more like 2000. And the line that I like to play against the Caro Kann is B3. Now, again, this looks like a silly opening. There is a clear plan to it. Obviously, I wouldn't be playing it otherwise. And if it was a silly opening, then I wouldn't have gotten a good position against, a master 2300 rated opponent. So, my opponent goes d5, of course, and the point is to go bishop b2 and gambit the pawn. Now, previously, and the most common move in this position, 79%, is knight to c3. However, that is actually slightly inaccurate, which I recently learned. Slightly more accurate is knight to e2. Now, you can get exactly the same position. So if bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, knight c3, knight f6, this is exactly the same position as if you go knight c3, knight f6, knight ge2, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, right? Exactly the same position. However, if you start with knight to e2, the majority of people play knight to f6, and this is what my opponent plays. Most people do not play bishop to f5. This bishop to f5 is only played in 17% of the games. Knight f6 is more common. And the point is, now you can play knight to g3. You're ready to play knight to c3, except black doesn't have time to play bishop to f5 because your knight already covers this square. A very subtle difference. And of course, black can get exactly the same position. But, a 2300 rated opponent just fell for this. I wouldn't even call it a trick. It's just a slightly beneficial positional idea for white. And my opponent finds the best move. He goes h5. He spends a minute on it because, he's not familiar with the position. That's part of the reason that I like to play this. And I'm sure many of you would be very tempted to play the move h4 here. But that's not the plan. This is not the idea. Because black can essentially just continue developing, and I would argue this pawn is actually relatively weak. Of course, you can win back your pawn, but black castles. He has an outpost ready for him on the g4 square should he ever want it, and it's not clear how white will ever start an attack on the king side. And let's say something like bishop e2, okay, that would allow the knight to be taken. That wouldn't be good. I don't know, let's say d4. For the sake of argument, knight here, bishop here. I'm trying to just play like non-committal moves. Let's say something like this. And white castles. Okay? The problem is that this h4 pawn is quite weak because white doesn't have a knight on f3 to protect it. And of course, white never wants to play g3 and weaken his light squares. And here I would argue the d pawn is actually a bit of a weakness because there is the open d file against it. So instead of going into this h4 line, I go knight c3. And when h4 is played, which of course black is going to play, we take on e4. And here, white is already slightly better. My opponent takes, I take back, bishop f5, and I go queen to f3, defending my knight attacking the bishop. This position has only been reached twice ever by some 2300 rated players. e6, just defending the bishop. There's no need to drop the bishop back. Black, of course, wants to get himself developed. And I would argue that already we have a pretty comfortable position. Now, here, the computer either wants to castle queenside, but which is what I choose. I castle queenside. Or wants to go g4. If the bishop retreats, then queen f4? Probably to go bishop g2 or something. Now, I did consider this idea of g4. Of course, if black takes en passant, we can probably take with the h-pawn, rook h1, queen h1, and this looks pretty nice. But what I didn't like is if black just ignores me. I thought this pawn is probably coming to h3 at some point, or it will just sit there and be really, really annoying, difficult to get rid of. That was my thought process, so I castled queenside instead. Knight to d7, bishop to d3. By the way, I love this opening, mainly because it's a gambit, but you win the pawn back pretty much no matter what black does. The only way for black to hold on to the pawn is to play f5 in the opening. So let me show you here. The only way to hold on to the pawn is f5, and this is just not good. It's just categorically bad. I mean, I think there's some lines where, like, take knight to g3, and black has to be really careful because white can essentially gambit 2 pawns. This is weak. This diagonal may be weak. The knight can get out. The rook can come to d1. And white should be winning this just because of how quick his development is. So it's basically impossible for black to hold on to the pawn. And, you know, my opponent is a CM. He's an incredibly good player. Okay, yeah, sorry, I thought the arrows were on for a second, but I was hovering my mouse over the moves. And, you know, even on move 10, my opponent is, of course, out of his comfort zone to an extent, because he's probably never really seen this kind of thing before. And the position is dead equal, but it's a game, and it's a game that my opponent doesn't know so well. So, knight d7, bishop d3, and here my opponent played a move I thought was really good, queen c7. Now, I was expecting queen to a5. This is typically what gets played with the idea to go bishop to a3. Like, let's say I play h3 here. Okay, apparently... Sorry, the a2 pawn hangs. I'm an idiot. So, rook d to e1 is playable. Why can't black take? Oh, knight c3 traps the queen. And if here, then rook here, you can't take because of this. Okay, cool. What I was going to say is that there's a common idea of putting the queen on a5 and playing bishop to a3, pinning your bishop to your king and forcing a bishop trade. So I was expecting queen a5. I was going to meet it with king to b1 so that bishop a3 can be obviously met with bishop takes g7. But let's say g7 wasn't hanging for the sake of argument. We can always move the bishop to a1 or c3 to avoid the trade. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. However, my opponent plays queen c7. And this really spooked me. Can you see why I was spooked in this position? I think I spent quite a while on the next move. So my problem was knight to e5. And I thought, oh, when I put my bishop on d3 on the previous move, I thought, well, this bishop can't come to d6 to support knight to e5, because I control that square, of course. And if my opponent takes and tries to go bishop d6, I'll just take on g7. And of course, even if he does get knight e5, that doesn't do anything. I completely missed queen c7. So I spent 3 minutes on the next move, because the computer wants rook d to e1. However, I was terrified of knight to e5. Now the computer wants to play rook d to e1, so that after takes, it says knight here, and the bishop will hang because of the pin on the pawn and the fact the queen is under attack. So the engine finds a better way to deal with it than I did. But let's say, I don't know, king b1 is played, something like knight e5. Here, apparently, queen f4. And if this, then we just take and, yeah, take a bunch of stuff. So yes, probably not logical for me to be so concerned. Sorry. Give me a second. I probably didn't need to be so concerned. And I mean, that's one of the problems when playing against masters. Like, they've just got a bit of an aura about them, where you trust their moves and think, oh, that's a really good move. Whereas the computer calls this an inaccuracy from black. So I dropped my queen back with the intention of meeting knight to e5 with, I think I wanted knight to... Was it knight to f6? No, I think I wanted to play knight d6. Check, and after bishop takes, if pawn takes, I have f4, and the knight is pinned, and I thought that this was a really cool idea. Of course, my opponent spots this because he's a really good player, and he spends about 30 seconds and castles queenside. Now, this surprised me. I thought that my opponent might play something a little bit more reserved. Maybe a move like bishop e7, castle kingside, and start launching the queenside pawns to try and checkmate me. However, I can understand the fact that he didn't do that, considering his pawn is on h4, so I probably shouldn't have expected that. He castled queenside. I played knight g5. Knight g5 is the best move. The problem is, if I do, let's say I play h3, which looks like a decent move, now knight to e5 is more of a concern, because I don't have tactics where I pin the knight at the end of the line, because the king has moved. That's the problem. So I now need to address this threat directly, so I address it by playing knight to g5. Of course, my queen now controls this square alongside my bishop, so the knight can't come here. I'm also attacking f7 and offering him a bishop trade. My opponent has to trade bishops. Otherwise, let's say he plays knight to f6, defending this pawn, take. This is playable, of course, but black is doubling his f-pawns for no reason, and it's a little bit difficult to kick my knight out unless you play a move like rook to h5, in which case I may try to play f4 at a good moment to support the knight. So, my opponent takes, I take with the queen. Although, of course, the rook and the queen are aligned, it doesn't matter, because there's no useful square for the knight to go to. If the knight goes to e5, I just drop the queen back, and your knight is under attack. So, you probably just have to move the knight, and white looks pretty comfortable. My opponent is clearly a good player. Again, he's not in 1940, he's 2300. He moves his knight to f6, and here I had to make a choice. Either I play queen e2 or queen f3. Of course, my queen is under attack. Which one of these moves would you choose? Take a minute, genuinely think about this position. Or queen c4, actually. Or queen c4. Which one would you pick? Where would you put your queen? I mean, even e3 is a square. Now, I'll tell you what I thought. So, I thought that if I put my queen on e2, then the knight is coming to d5, and the knight will come to f4, and, you know, I could be vulnerable. Now, this was silly. There was no reason for me to be concerned about this. And the best move in this position for white is actually g3, taking away this square from the knight. One of the important things in this position as well is this bishop can't move because I will take on g7. Probably. Which will be annoying for black. And let's say black goes for these trades. This just benefits white because we get the open file, pressure on g7, pressure on f7. The knight can't come to f4 anymore. So that's why I rejected queen to e2, but it wasn't a good reason. I also didn't play queen e3 because knight d5 came with a tempo. I didn't want that. Queen c4, not going to lie, I didn't even consider this as a move. I didn't think it did anything. So I chose queen to f3. Now this is an inaccuracy, and my opponent exploited it perfectly. There is one move for the black pieces to take advantage of the placement of my queen. I guarantee like 95% of you won't find it, even though you know that my queen can be exploited. Well, by process of elimination, you should be able to know that either this knight or this rook is going to be involved in this, right? Because my queen's on a light square, this bishop can't attack it, this rook isn't in the game, and how can a queen exploit a queen? It's got to be one of these two pieces. And it's the rook. Rook d5. Attacking the knight and preparing rook to f5. I saw this move and I was like, okay, this is why my opponent is a master. But all hope is not lost. I go knight e4. Getting my knight out of danger, offering a knight trade. My opponent plays rook to f5, attacking my queen. I go queen to e3. Now, luckily, the rook can't come to the e5 square because I control that square. But my opponent takes on e4, I take back, and he takes on f2. Now, I spoke to one of the teammates of my opponent after the game, I believe, who... Oh, no, was it? There was somebody, I'm sure it was a teammate of my opponent, who thought that this was a bit greedy. Now, the only move here is rook h to f1. You have to get this rook off the board. You're down a pawn. However, there is a lot of good pressure in this position for white. and we can take full advantage of this. Now, black also has to be careful. He trades on f1. However, he cannot take on h2. I saw this because bishop e5. The queen is completely trapped. Completely trapped. Of course, my opponent sees this. He goes queen d7. Now, queen d7, what's the point of queen d7? I think I couldn't figure it out during the game. I think maybe the point is he wants to go here, but I have bishop to e5. And after bishop to d6... Oh, okay, I take on d6 and then take on f7. Okay, that makes sense, yes. So, I didn't even spot that. If my opponent had played king to b8, I probably would have considered bishop to e5 ideas, and I probably would have seen it. But queen d7 is played, so that, you know, if I play a nothing move, and my opponent moves the king, and I give this check, let's say, the king can probably just run to a8. Although there is better options for white in this position. I play... no, I do not play h3. Oh, no, I do play h3. No, I do play h3. h3 is a perfectly fine move. The issue is that if I play a move like rook f... Oh, no, rook f3 actually deals with this problem. Because I can probably just take it. Or take it with the pawn, maybe. So that's also an option. But I basically don't want the pawn to advance, and I'm trying to claim that this is going to be a weakness. Whilst my queen can target many, many things at once, it can also target this pawn. This pawn also can't come to g5 to defend, because the pawn is pinned to the rook, and this bishop can't come to e7 to defend, because g7 will hang. So although I'm down a pawn, I've got chances. However, I only have 5 minutes on the clock. So... Queen d7, h3, f6, best move from my opponent. The problem is, with the black position, he needs to get developed. So he needs to play f6 so that my bishop is cut off from g7 so he can develop this bishop. Try and find the best move for the white pieces. I was very happy with this, and it's based on what I've been saying already. It's rook f4. We're targeting this pawn. Again, I'm trying to claim this pawn is a weakness. If I do nothing, okay, that hangs a pawn, but maybe the queen can't take it because I take on e6. Then at some point, black probably plays the move d5. Here I do have d4, but let's imagine I don't have d4. This is really difficult for me to really make any progress. Black will get himself developed, and it's unclear how I'm going to do anything here. I'm just down a clean pawn, and the black pieces are getting into the game. So I have to play with like time in mind. I need to do things quickly. So rook f4, applying pressure to the h4 pawn. Queen d5 from my opponent. If I take here, then rook h4, queen h4, and queen takes g2. This looks very uncomfortable. I can lose the game very quickly in this kind of fashion, which I need to be careful of at all times. Of course, if the queen were to take here, this would be completely fine, but black doesn't have to do that. So, try and find the best move for the white pieces here. Queen g6. We can't allow a queen trade. Of course, if I trade queens, the game is as good as over. It's as good as over. I have nothing. So I need to keep the queens on the board. Queen g6. I threaten to invade on e8, maybe pick up the e6 pawn, and I just apply general pressure. My opponent here finds a really nice defensive resource that I missed. I assumed he was going to drop his queen back, in which case I was going to offer him a repetition, which I would of course be happy to take. If the queen comes back here, again I can probably still just repeat, or maybe even play a more ambitious move like rook to a4. Oh my god, why do I keep doing that? Apologies. Here we go. So my opponent finds queen h5, a really strong move, stopping the infiltration and offering a trade and defending h4, although it's already defended. Here I bring my queen back to e4. I go, okay, defend yourself. If you want to come back, of course, I will repeat. So my opponent plays the move e5. I play the move rook to f5. Here, for some reason, I expected my opponent to drop the queen back. I don't know why I expected that, because I have bishop e5 here. And if you take, then I take and take and take. I saw this idea, so I was hoping my opponent might fall for it. And of course, after takes, if you don't take back, I'm just up well, no, I'm not up a pawn, we're level on pawns. And if here, I have here, saving myself, saving the bishop, and we have equal material, the queen is about to come in with check, and I'm fine. My opponent's a good player, though. He plays queen e8, which looks passive because we play the move d4. You can't take because you hang your queen, obviously. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers. I will win my pawn back. The tides are turning. Queen d7, de5. Instead of taking back, my opponent makes things complicated. He plays g6. G6 is a very tricky move. You cannot take on f6. Why? You should all see it. Bishop h6, king moves, queen d1, block, mate. The only way to avoid mate is to sack the rook. And it's probably not just losing the exchange. I'm probably losing the whole rook, actually. So it's completely lost. So, the best move, rook f1. And this position is +1. It's +1. My opponent plays f5, attacking my queen. Here, I play e6. Not the best move. The best move I did actually consider, but I didn't play. Try and get an advantageous position here for the white pieces. There's one move, and I considered this move, and I'm really annoyed that I didn't play it. It's queen a4. And the point is, I maintain these threats, but I add another threat. And if my opponent tries to defend it, then e6, and black is lost. Completely lost. I don't know why I didn't play that, to be honest. The computer wants to play queen d5, but I, of course, just take on a7. And I mean, black can try and fight back, sure. But in all likelihood, this is probably just better, if not winning, for the white pieces. However, I played e6. The times are no longer showing for some reason. Something happened to the live boards, but in this position, I'm on 2 minutes and 30. My opponent's on 5 minutes and 30. So I'm low on time, and my opponent's making things tricky. And I find the wrong idea. I play e6. This is under attack, this is under attack, but so is my queen. Queen d6, I don't have time to take the rook. Here I play queen c4. Again, I could play this. I probably should play this. And if, like, the rook moves, then I just take on a7. The computer wants bishop h6, king b1, rook to e8. Trying to pick up the pawn. And here I do have queen h4, and I don't know. Oh, the bishop's under attack. Bishop e3, that's a strange move, but okay. And there's still a game, but I'm low on time. I go queen c4, trying to hold on to my pawn, maintain this attack. My opponent goes rook to h7. Now, this position is good for me if I play rook e1. And after rook to e7, I have bishop f6, rook e8, apparently a4. I don't really understand why, but a4, queen a3, king b1, and white is clearly the one pushing here for a win. That much is obvious. But I have seconds left at this point. I maybe have like 40 seconds or something. And as I've said a few times, this bishop h6 idea is scary if the queen can access the back rank. So, I'm sorry if the lighting is weird, by the way. The sun's just come out for no reason. I'm not going to complain, but after rook h6, of course, saving the rook and defending the e7 square, I play rook d1. And I completely blunder this, and I resign in this position because I know I'm completely lost. King b1, here, the game is over. And it was heartbreaking. My opponent wins. I played what I thought was such a good game against, you know, a candidate master, a 2300 rated player. I play my Gambit against the Caro Kann. The Gambit that I talk about all the time, and I get a great position. This is a brilliant position. I miss a couple of opportunities because I'm low on time and my opponent is playing tricky. But this is what masters do. They just keep setting traps, they keep pushing, and eventually it pays off. I lose my game. in unfortunate circumstances. However, I was very happy with how I played. I found some really nice moves during that game, and I was really, really happy that I was able to actually compete with a player of this caliber. And unfortunately, all of my teammates also lost their games. The Warwick team, I think, had masters on every single board. So, you know, that was kind of to be expected. So we are on 1 win, 2 draws, 1 loss so far. And again, we are the bottom seed team. So that is a great record going into round 5. Thank you all very much for watching this video. If you haven't seen the previous episodes of this tournament, check out the playlist down here. And if you want to see another video using this Gambit with the Caro Kann, against the Caro Kann, which, by the way, it's awesome. You saw in this game, it worked out really well. Check out the video up here. And I'll see you in one of those videos. Thank you very much for watching.